The morning sky above New York City had never seen anything like it. 3 massive ships appeared without warning, their silver hulls catching the sunlight like mirrors. They were beautiful in a way that made people stop walking and stare up at the heavens. The ships moved slowly, gracefully, as if they were dancing through the air. Sarah Chen stood on the roof of the United Nations building, watching the alien vessels descend. As Admiral of Earth's Space Defense Force, she had been preparing for this moment her entire career. But nothing could have prepared her for the reality of first contact. The ships were enormous. Each one was easily the size of a city block, but they moved with impossible silence. No roar of engines, no blast of wind from their passage. They simply glided down from the clouds like fallen angels. Admiral, her aide, Lieutenant Collins, spoke quietly beside her. "The Secretary General is ready for you in the assembly hall." Sarah nodded but didn't take her eyes off the ships. They had positioned themselves in a perfect triangle around Manhattan, hovering exactly 1,000 feet above the ground. The precision was unsettling. Inside the United Nations Assembly Hall, delegates from every nation on Earth sat in tense silence. The air conditioning worked overtime, but Sarah could still smell the nervous sweat of 200 world leaders. She took her seat in the front row, her uniform crisp despite the humidity. The lights dimmed suddenly. A soft blue glow filled the center of the hall, and something began to materialize. Sarah's hand moved instinctively to her sidearm, then stopped. The figure taking shape was clearly not human, but it radiated no sense of threat. The being that appeared was tall, perhaps 8 feet in height, and seemed to be made of living crystal. Its body caught and reflected the light in patterns that were almost hypnotic. When it moved, tiny chimes seemed to ring in the air around it. "Greetings," the creature said, and somehow everyone in the hall understood the words perfectly. "I am Ambassador Zethkri of the Galactic Confederation. We have been watching your species for some time now." A murmur ran through the assembly. Sarah leaned forward in her chair. "Your people show great promise," Zethkri continued. "In just a few thousand years, you have developed from primitive hunters to space travelers. This is remarkable. Most species take much longer to reach this level." The Secretary General stood up slowly. "Ambassador, we are honored by your visit. What brings you to Earth?" Zethkri's crystalline form seemed to pulse with gentle light. "We come with an offer. Your world sits at the edge of what you call the Milky Way galaxy. This region of space is beautiful, but it is also dangerous. There are threats in the darkness between stars that your people cannot imagine." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. She had always known that space was vast and largely unknown. The idea that there were specific threats out there was terrifying. "The Devourers," Zethkri said, and his voice carried a weight of ancient fear. "They are creatures from the early days of the universe. They consume entire star systems, leaving nothing but empty space behind them. They have no interest in negotiation or peace. They exist only to feed." The hall was completely silent now. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat in her ears. "Then there are the void wraiths," the ambassador continued. "Beings of pure energy who can pass through solid matter as if it does not exist. They feed on the life force of entire planets. When they are finished, the world becomes a cold, dead rock floating in space." Several delegates were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The president of Brazil was wiping sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. "These are just 2 of the many dangers that exist in deep space," Zethkri explained. "Your species is young, and your technology is limited. Alone, you would not survive an encounter with any of these threats." Sarah stood up. "What exactly are you offering us?" The crystal being turned to face her, and she felt as if she were being examined by something far older than human civilization. "We offer protection," Zethkri said simply. The Galactic Confederation has existed for over 50,000 of your years. We have protected hundreds of species from the dangers of space. We can do the same for humanity. What would it cost us? Asked the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Very little, Zethkri replied. You would provide raw materials that are common on your world but rare elsewhere. Iron, copper, water. In return, we would share some of our technology with you. Medical advances that could extend your lives by centuries. Clean energy that would solve your environmental problems. And most importantly, the protection of our battle fleets. It sounded too good to be true. Sarah had learned long ago that when something sounded too good to be true, it usually was. How exactly would this protection work? She asked. Our ships would patrol the space around your solar system, Zethkri explained. Any hostile force attempting to approach Earth would be intercepted and destroyed before it could pose a threat. Your people could focus on developing your civilization in peace. The Secretary General was nodding enthusiastically. This is a generous offer, Ambassador. We would need time to discuss it among ourselves, of course. Of course, Zethkri agreed. We understand that this is a significant decision. We will remain in orbit around your world while you deliberate. Sarah felt something nagging at the back of her mind. The whole thing was too neat, too perfect. In her experience, the universe didn't hand out free gifts. Ambassador, she said, you mentioned that you've protected hundreds of species. What happened to those species? Are they still independent? For the first time, Zethkri seemed to hesitate. His crystalline form flickered slightly, like a television with bad reception. They are safe, he said finally. They live peaceful lives under our guidance. Many have chosen to integrate fully into the Confederation. Integrate how? They follow Confederation law. They trade only with approved partners. They limit their expansion to worlds we deem suitable. It is a small price to pay for safety. Sarah felt the pieces clicking together in her mind. So they give up their independence in exchange for protection. They give up the dangerous freedom to make mistakes that could destroy them. Zethkri corrected. Young species often make choices that lead to their extinction. We prevent that. The hall erupted in whispered conversations. Sarah could see the delegates weighing the options. On one hand, protection from cosmic horrors and advanced technology. On the other hand, becoming a vassal state to an alien empire. She stood up again. Ambassador, I appreciate the offer, and I understand that humanity needs allies in a dangerous galaxy. But I have a question. Please ask. You say there are terrible threats out there, ancient evils that consume star systems. Where is the most dangerous place your fleets operate? What's the worst mission you have to deal with? Zethkri's form flickered again, more noticeably this time. Admiral Chen, I do not understand why this matters. Because, Sarah said, feeling the eyes of the entire world on her. If we're going to be part of this confederation, we want to contribute more than just raw materials. We want to help fight these threats. So tell me about the most dangerous mission your people face and send us there. The silence in the hall was absolute. Sarah could hear the air conditioning humming, could hear someone's stomach growling 3 rows back. But mostly she could hear her own words echoing in her mind. Had she just volunteered humanity for a suicide mission? Zethkri's crystalline body was no longer glowing softly. Instead, it seemed to be pulsing with agitated light, like a strobe light at a dance club. Admiral, he said, and his voice carried undertones that the translation devices couldn't quite capture. You do not understand what you are asking. There are regions of space where even our most advanced civilizations fear to go. Places where we have lost entire fleets without ever learning what destroyed them. Then that's exactly where we want to go, Sarah replied firmly. The Secretary General was looking at her like she had lost her mind. The President of Russia was shaking his head slowly. But Sarah kept her eyes locked on the alien ambassador. Humans, Zethkri said, and the words seemed to carry weight it hadn't before. You are a young species. You have not yet learned the wisdom of caution. The threats I speak of are not enemies to be fought. They are forces of nature to be avoided. We're not very good at avoiding things, Sarah admitted. It's not really in our nature. Zethkri stood motionless for a long moment. Sarah wondered if he was communicating with his ships, or perhaps with other members of his species somewhere among the stars. Finally, he spoke. There is a region of space designated Omega 7. It is approximately 300 light-years from your solar system. Over the past century, we have lost 3 entire battle fleets in that region. We do not know what destroyed them. We do not know if they faced a single threat or multiple enemies. All we know is that they entered Omega 7 and were never heard from again. Sarah felt her heart rate increase. This was exactly what she had been hoping for. How big were these fleets? Each consisted of 50 Dreadnought-class vessels and their support ships. Nearly 200 ships per fleet, with crews totaling over 100,000 beings. The numbers were staggering. Sarah's entire space defense force consisted of 12 ships, none of which would have been considered more than a patrol boat by Confederation standards. "When do we leave?" she asked. "Admiral Chen," the Secretary General said urgently. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately before making any commitments." Sarah ignored him. She was still looking at Zethkri, whose crystalline form was now pulsing so rapidly it was almost hard to look at. "You would send your primitive vessels against a threat that destroyed 600 of our most advanced ships?" the ambassador asked. "That's exactly what we're going to do," Sarah confirmed. "Unless you think humanity isn't up to the task." It was a challenge, plain and simple. And judging by the way Zethkri's light patterns shifted, he recognized it as such. "Very well," he said finally. "If this is truly what humanity desires, we will provide you with the coordinates to Omega 7. But understand this. The Confederation cannot be held responsible for what happens to you there." Sarah smiled for the first time since the ships had appeared in the sky. "Ambassador, I don't think you understand something about humans. We've never needed anyone else to be responsible for what happens to us. We've gotten this far by being too stubborn to know when we're beaten." As the alien ambassador began to fade away, Sarah was already thinking about ship modifications, crew selection, and weapons loadouts. Somewhere in the back of her mind, a small voice wondered if she had just doomed her species. But a much louder voice was already planning for the fight of humanity's life. The most dangerous mission in the galaxy was waiting for them. And for the first time in her career, Admiral Sarah Chen couldn't wait to get started. 3 months had passed since the first contact with the Galactic Confederation. The world had changed in ways both subtle and dramatic. Confederation technology was already being integrated into human systems, but slowly, carefully. The aliens seemed in no hurry to share their most advanced secrets. Sarah Chen stood in the shipyard orbiting Luna, watching the final modifications being made to the ship that would carry humanity into the unknown. The vessel had originally been called the UES Endeavor, but the crew had voted to rename it. Now, painted in bold letters across its hull, was a single word: defiance. "Admiral," came a voice behind her. Sarah turned to see Captain Marcus Webb approaching. Webb had been her choice to command the mission, despite protests from politicians who wanted someone more diplomatic. But Sarah hadn't chosen him for his diplomacy skills. "How are the modifications coming along, Marcus?" she asked. Webb grinned, and Sarah was reminded why she had selected him. The man actually seemed excited about flying into the most dangerous region of known space. "Better than expected," he reported. "The Confederation gave us some interesting toys, but our engineers have been busy making improvements they didn't expect." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of improvements?" "Well, they gave us their standard shield technology, but Dr. Petrov figured out how to reverse the polarity and turn the shields into weapons. Instead of keeping energy out, we can now push energy out with incredible force. That sounds dangerous. Extremely dangerous, Webb agreed cheerfully. The test firing last week created a hole in an asteroid that went all the way through to the other side. The Confederation observers were not pleased. Sarah could imagine. The aliens had been watching human modifications with what seemed like growing concern. Ambassador Zethkree had visited the shipyard twice, and each time he left, looking more agitated than when he arrived. "What else?" Sarah asked. "The railgun system is operational. Turns out that when you accelerate a tungsten rod to about 10% of the speed of light, it does wonderful things to enemy armor. The projectiles are completely invisible to most sensor systems until impact." Sarah nodded. Humans had always been good at finding new ways to hurt each other. It was only natural that they would be equally creative when it came to hurting aliens. And the crew? 200 volunteers, Webb said. Every single one of them knew this was likely a one-way trip. We still had to turn away over 3,000 applicants. That didn't surprise Sarah. Humans had always been drawn to the impossible. The more dangerous something was, the more eager they were to try it. Meanwhile, halfway across the galaxy, the Confederation War Council was meeting in emergency session. The chamber was vast, designed to accommodate the many different species that made up the alliance. Some floated in tanks of methane, others required gravity 3 times Earth normal, and a few existed as pure energy contained in crystalline matrices. Fleet Commander Yat Shen of the Kithara dominated the center of the room. His species resembled giant praying mantises, but with 6 arms instead of 2. Each arm ended in a hand capable of precise manipulation, and his compound eyes could track dozens of separate targets simultaneously. "The situation in Omega-7 is deteriorating," he announced, his words translated into dozens of languages simultaneously. "Our long-range sensors have detected massive energy signatures. Something is stirring in that region." A holographic display materialized above the council table, showing a 3-dimensional map of local space. The Omega-7 region pulsed an ominous red, like an infected wound on the body of the galaxy. "How massive?" asked Counselor Veth Ara, whose gaseous form swirled within its containment field. "Equivalent to the energy output of an entire star," Yat Shen replied grimly. "But the emissions are not consistent with any natural stellar phenomenon. Whatever is in Omega-7, it's artificial, and it's waking up." Ambassador Zethkree's crystalline form flickered with anxiety. "The timing cannot be coincidental. The disturbances began shortly after the humans accepted our protection offer." "You suspect a connection?" asked another counselor. "I suspect nothing," Zethkree replied. "But I fear everything. The humans are different from other species we have encountered. Their response to danger is not flight or submission, it is aggression." "They are primitives," scoffed Counselor Drexmon, whose metallic body clanked as he shifted position. "Their largest ship is smaller than our scout vessels. Their weapons fire physical projectiles. They pose no threat to anything except themselves." Yat Shen's compound eyes focused on the metallic being. "Counselor Drexmon, might I remind you that those same primitives asked to be sent to our most dangerous combat zone? When offered safety, they requested danger instead." The room fell silent. This was indeed unprecedented in Confederation history. Every species they had encountered had been grateful for protection from the horrors of deep space. None had ever asked to face those horrors directly. "Perhaps," Zethkree said slowly, "we should reconsider allowing them to proceed to Omega-7. "On what grounds?" Yat Shen asked. "They are not yet full members of the Confederation. We cannot simply order them to abandon their mission. Then we could refuse to provide the coordinates. Too late. I transmitted them 3 days ago, as promised." The council chamber erupted in a dozen different types of protests. Some counselors expressed concern for human safety, others worried about the precedent of allowing primitives into dangerous space, and a few wondered what would happen if the humans actually discovered what was in Omega-7. Back at Luna Shipyard, Dr. Elena Vasquez was putting the finishing touches on her modifications to the ship's science systems. As the mission's chief science officer, she had been given carte blanche to prepare for any possible discovery. The quantum sensors are operating at 3 times normal sensitivity, she reported to Captain Webb. If there's anything unusual in Omega-7, we'll detect it long before it detects us. Define unusual, Webb requested. Anomalous energy signatures, gravitational distortions, exotic matter, temporal fluctuations, dimensional instabilities, artificial structures, and biological signatures larger than a kilometer in any dimension. Webb paused. Biological signatures larger than a kilometer? The Confederation databases contain references to something they call macroorganisms, creatures so large they can be seen from orbit. Most of the files are classified, but I was able to piece together some information, such as the fact that every civilization that has encountered a macroorganism has either been completely destroyed or has refused to discuss the experience afterward. Webb considered this information. Dr. Vasquez, in your professional opinion, what are the odds that we're flying into something that will kill us all? Elena smiled grimly. Approximately 97%. I like those odds, Webb replied, and Elena wasn't entirely sure he was joking. The final weeks of preparation passed quickly. The crew underwent intensive training in zero-gravity combat, xenobiology, and what the instructors euphemistically called survival in hostile environments. The truth was that nobody really knew how to prepare for what they might find in Omega-7. Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka spent her time studying every piece of data the Confederation had provided about the lost fleets. The information was frustratingly incomplete. The fleets had simply vanished. No distress calls, no debris fields, no survivors. It was as if they had been erased from existence. Captain, she said during one of the final briefings, I've been analyzing the patrol routes of the lost fleets. There's a pattern. Webb looked up from his tactical display. What kind of pattern? All 3 fleets were following standard Confederation search patterns, systematic, methodical, predictable. They would have announced their presence to anything in the region long before they reached it. And maybe that's why they were destroyed. If there's something in Omega-7 that doesn't like visitors, it would have plenty of time to prepare. For them. Webb nodded slowly. So we don't follow a standard search pattern. Exactly. We go in fast, quiet, and random. No advance announcements, no predictable routes. We act like predators, not explorers. Chief Engineer Tom Morrison had his own concerns. Captain, I've been running simulations on our modified systems. The power requirements are enormous. If we use all our new weapons at once, we'll drain the reactor in less than 5 minutes. Then we'll have to make those 5 minutes count, Webb replied. As launch day approached, the crew of the Defiance received a final briefing from Admiral Chen. She stood before them in the ship's main assembly area, looking at the faces of 200 volunteers who had chosen to fly into the unknown. You all know what we're facing, she began. The Confederation has lost 600 ships and over 100,000 lives trying to solve the mystery of Omega-7. The smart thing to do would be to stay away from that region entirely. A murmur of agreement ran through the assembled crew. But we're not here to do the smart thing, Sarah continued. We're here to do the human thing. The Confederation offered us protection, and in return, we promised to help them fight their wars. This is our first chance to prove that humanity is worth their investment. She paused, looking around the room at the eager faces. I won't lie to you. The odds are that none of you will return from this mission. But if you do return, you'll come back as heroes, not just to Earth, but to the entire galaxy. You'll be the humans who solved a mystery that has plagued the Confederation for over a century." The crew was completely silent now, hanging on her every word. "The ship is ready. The crew is ready. All that remains is the journey itself. You launch in 6 hours, bring back answers, and if possible, bring back yourselves." As the crew dispersed to make final preparations, Captain Webb approached. "Admiral Chen, any last words of wisdom?" he asked. Sarah smiled. "Marcus, the Confederation thinks they're sending us on a suicide mission. They expect us to fail because that's what civilized species do when faced with the impossible." "And we're not civilized?" "We're human," Sarah replied. "We don't know when to quit. Use that." 6 hours later, the Defiance fired its engines and began the journey to Omega 7. Behind them, Earth continued its rotation, unaware that its fate might be decided in a region of space 300 light-years away. And in the Confederation, War Council Chamber, Fleet Commander Yachen watched the human ship disappear into hyperspace and wondered if they had just witnessed the beginning of something unprecedented or the end of a very short partnership. The hyperspace journey to Omega 7 took 18 days. During that time, the crew of the Defiance ran endless drills, checked and rechecked their equipment, and tried not to think too hard about the fact that they were flying towards something that had destroyed 600 Confederation ships. Captain Marcus Webb stood on the bridge as they prepared to drop out of hyperspace. Around him, his crew worked with the quiet efficiency that came from weeks of intense training. But Webb could sense the tension in the air. Everyone knew they were about to face the unknown. 30 seconds to hyperspace exit, announced Lieutenant. Commander Yuki Tanaka from the navigation station. All stations report ready, added Lieutenant Collins from communications. Webb settled into his command chair. Dr. Vasquez, are your sensors ready? All systems operating at maximum sensitivity, the science officer replied. If there's anything out there, we'll know about it the moment we drop back into normal space. Weapons ready, Captain, reported Chief Gunner Rodriguez. All systems are green, Webb nodded. Remember, people, we're not here to fight unless we have to. Our mission is to gather information, but if something tries to kill us, we kill it back harder. A few nervous chuckles echoed around the bridge. 10 seconds, Tanaka announced. The ship shuddered as it dropped out of hyperspace, and immediately every alarm on the bridge began screaming. Jesus Christ, someone whispered. Webb stared at the main view screen, and for a moment his mind simply refused to process what he was seeing. The space ahead of them was wrong. Not empty, not filled with stars and planets, but wrong in a fundamental way that made his eyes water. Dr. Vasquez, he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Report. I'm reading massive gravitational anomalies, she replied, her fingers dancing across her control panel. The space ahead of us is twisted, folded in ways that shouldn't be possible. It's like reality itself is bent out of shape. On the view screen, darkness writhed and pulsed. But it wasn't the darkness of empty space. This was something alive, something that moved with purpose and intelligence. Occasionally, flashes of light would appear within the darkness, only to be swallowed moments later. Captain, Tanaka said, her voice tight with fear. I'm detecting massive structures within the anomaly. They're enormous. The largest is approximately 4,000 kilometers in diameter. Webb felt his mouth go dry. 4,000 kilometers. That was larger than Earth's moon. Biological or artificial? He asked. I don't know, Vasquez admitted. The readings are unlike anything in our databases. Whatever these structures are, they're not made of any known material. As they watched, something began to emerge from the writhing darkness. At first, it looked like a mountain floating in space. Then the mountain moved, and Webb realized it was alive. The creature that appeared before them defied description. Its body was dark as the void between stars, but covered with what looked like cities of light. Patterns of bioluminescence crawled across its surface like living circuits, and from its bulk extended tentacles that stretched for hundreds of kilometers, in every direction. "Dear God," whispered Dr. Vasquez. "It's beautiful." "It's also reading our presence," reported Lieutenant Collins. "I'm detecting focused energy beams scanning our ship." "Weapons?" asked Chief Gunner Rodriguez. "No," Webb said firmly. "Not yet. We're here to learn, remember?" The creature continued its examination of the human ship. More tentacles emerged from the darkness, each one covered with organs that pulsed with their own internal light. Webb had the distinct impression that they were being studied by something far older and more intelligent than humanity. "Captain," Vasquez said suddenly, "I'm detecting other structures in the anomaly. Smaller ones, but still massive. They appear to be moving toward us." The view screen split to show multiple angles. From the depths of the twisted space, more creatures were approaching. Each one was different, but all shared the same impossible scale and the same pattern of living lights across their surfaces. "How many?" Webb asked. "At least 30, Tanaka replied. "Possibly more. They're hard to distinguish from the background distortions." Webb made a decision that would haunt him for the rest of his life. "Open a communications channel. Let's try to talk to them." "Channel open, sir." Webb stood up and faced the view screen. "This is Captain Marcus Webb of the human vessel Defiance. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and understanding." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the creatures began to sing. The sound came through every speaker on the ship simultaneously. It was not words, not music, but something that bypassed the ears and spoke directly to the mind. The crew of the Defiance heard stories of ancient civilizations, of wars fought across millions of years, of the rise and fall of entire galaxies, and they heard hunger. "Captain," Dr. Vasquez gasped, tears streaming down her face. "They're showing us what happened to the Confederation fleets." The song changed, became a memory. Webb saw proud alien ships entering this region of space, their crews confident in their advanced technology. He watched as the creatures surrounded them, not with violence but with curiosity. The aliens tried to communicate, tried to establish peaceful contact, but the creatures were too different, too alien. The Confederation fleets interpreted their approach as an attack and opened fire. Energy beams and missiles filled the space between the ships and the creatures responded. What followed was not a battle. It was a feeding frenzy. The massive beings absorbed the energy of the alien weapons, growing stronger with each shot fired at them. When the Confederation ships tried to retreat, the creatures followed, not out of malice, but out of need. They were hungry. They had been sleeping for millions of years, and the energy of the alien fleets was the first sustenance they had encountered in eons. They didn't attack the fleets, Webb realized. The fleets attacked them. The song continued, showing the aftermath. The creatures had consumed the ships, the crews, everything, but not out of evil intent. They were simply feeding, like whales consuming krill in Earth's oceans. "Captain," Collins said urgently, "the creatures are moving closer. They're surrounding us." Webb looked at the tactical display. The human ship was now completely encircled by beings larger than mountains. Any one of them could have crushed the Defiance without effort. "They're curious about us," Dr. Vasquez said. "Our energy signature is different from the Confederation ships. They want to understand what we are." "And if they decide to feed on us?" asked Rodriguez. "Then we're dead," Webb replied simply. "But they haven't attacked yet. That means we still have a chance." One of the creatures extended a tentacle toward the human ship. The appendage was easily as large as the Defiance itself, covered with sensory organs that pulsed with rainbow light. "It wants to touch us," Vasquez whispered. "Let it," Webb decided. "Captain, that's extremely dangerous," Tanaka protested. "Everything about this mission is extremely dangerous," Webb replied. But if we run now, we'll never get another chance to learn what these beings are. The tentacle made contact with the ship's hull. Immediately, the bridge filled with a presence that was vast and ancient beyond human comprehension. The creature was inside their minds, examining their thoughts and memories with the same gentle curiosity a human might show when studying an interesting insect. Webb felt his entire life being reviewed in moments. His childhood, his military training, his hopes and fears, his love for his family back on Earth. The creature absorbed it all, processing information at a speed that made human computers seem like stone tools. Then, suddenly, the presence withdrew. The tentacle pulled back from the ship, and the creatures began to communicate among themselves. The song that filled the space around them was different now, more complex, filled with harmonies that seemed to span octaves beyond human hearing. "They're debating," Dr. Vasquez said in wonder. "They're trying to decide what to do with us." "Can you understand what they're saying?" "Fragments. They're discussing whether we're like the others, whether we're a threat. But there's something else. They're excited about something." The debate among the creatures continued for several minutes. Then, one of the largest beings approached the human ship. When it spoke, its voice came through the ship's communication system with perfect clarity. "Small ones," it said, and the words carried the weight of eons. "You are not like the others who came before. They brought fear and weapons. You bring curiosity and questions." Webb stood up straighter. "We come seeking knowledge. We want to understand why the others were destroyed." "They were not destroyed," the creature replied. "They were consumed. We had been sleeping for many cycles, and their energy was the first nourishment we had encountered since the Great Darkness began." The Great Darkness? Images flooded the bridge's view screen. Webb saw the galaxy as it had been millions of years ago, filled with light and life and countless civilizations. Then came the darkness, creeping across space like a plague, consuming stars and planets alike. The creatures had fought against it, but eventually had been forced to retreat to the farthest edges of known space, where they had gone into hibernation to wait for the darkness to pass. "The darkness is ending," the creature continued. "Life returns to the galaxy, but we are still hungry from our long sleep." Webb felt a chill run down his spine. "Are you going to consume us as well?" "That depends," the creature replied. "The others who came before offered only resistance. They fought us because they could not understand us. But you seek understanding. Perhaps there is another way." "What kind of way?" The creature's bioluminescent patterns shifted, and Webb had the impression that it was smiling. "You are small, but you are clever. Your species has survived by adapting, by finding new solutions to old problems. We propose a trade." "What kind of trade?" "We will share our knowledge with you," the creature explained. "Secrets of the universe that predate your species by millions of years, technologies that could transform your civilization. In return, you will help us find new sources of sustenance that do not require the destruction of other civilizations." Webb looked around at his crew. Every face showed the same mixture of fear and fascination. They were being offered knowledge, beyond human comprehension, but at what cost? "How do we know you won't simply consume us once we've helped you?" he asked. "Because," the creature replied, "you have shown us something we had forgotten. You have shown us that it is possible to meet the unknown with curiosity instead of fear. This is a gift more valuable than energy." Dr. Vasquez stepped forward. "Captain, the implications are staggering. These beings have existed since before human civilization began. The things they could teach us might also destroy us," Webb replied. "Knowledge can be as dangerous as any weapon." "True," the creature acknowledged, "but ignorance is always fatal. The darkness that consumed the galaxy before will return eventually. When it does, Your species will need all the knowledge and allies it can find. Webb made his decision. What do you need us to do? The creature's patterns brightened. First, you must return to your people and explain what you have found here. Many will not believe you. Some will call for war against us. But a few will understand the opportunity that has been presented. And then? Then those few will return here, and we will begin the great work of preparing for what is to come. As the creature spoke, the other beings began to withdraw into the depths of twisted space. Soon, only the largest remained, its tentacles still extended toward the human ship. We will wait for your return, it promised. But do not wait too long. The darkness stirs at the edge of the galaxy, and time grows short. With that, the creature faded back into the anomaly, leaving the Defiance alone in normal space. The stars reappeared, looking almost shockingly ordinary after what they had witnessed. Webb slumped back into his command chair. Plot a course. For home, Lieutenant Tanaka. Yes, sir. As the ship prepared to jump back into hyperspace, Dr. Vasquez approached the captain. Sir, do you think we made the right choice? Webb looked at the view screen where the last traces of the anomaly were fading away. I don't know, Elena, but I know we've just changed the course of human history. The question is whether we've changed it for the better. The Defiance jumped into hyperspace, carrying its crew and their impossible story back toward Earth. Behind them, ancient beings settled back into their long vigil, waiting for humanity to decide its fate. The return journey from Omega 7 should have been routine. 18 days in hyperspace, time to process what they had seen, time to prepare their report for Earth Command. But Captain Marcus Webb knew that nothing would ever be routine again on the third day of their return voyage. Dr. Elena Vasquez burst onto the bridge with an expression that mixed terror with excitement. Captain, she gasped, still catching her breath from running through the ship's corridors. We have a problem. Webb looked up from the tactical reports he had been reviewing. What kind of problem? The quantum residue from our contact with the creatures. It's still active, and it's changing us. The bridge fell silent. Webb felt his stomach drop. Changing us how? Our cellular structure is evolving. The DNA in every crew member is being rewritten at the molecular level. But the changes aren't random. They're systematic, purposeful. Webb stood up slowly. Are we dying? No, sir. We're becoming something else. Something more than human. Before Webb could respond, Lieutenant Commander Yuki Tanaka spoke up from the navigation console. Captain, I'm detecting an anomaly in hyperspace ahead of us. Something large is matching our course and speed. On screen. The view screen flickered to life, showing the swirling colors of hyperspace. But there, moving alongside them like a vast shadow, was something that shouldn't have been able to exist in this dimension. It's one of them, Webb realized. One of the creatures from Omega 7. It followed us. Dr. Vasquez checked her instruments. The quantum signature matches the largest entity we encountered. But, Captain, this should be impossible. These beings are bound to the spatial anomalies of their region. They shouldn't be able to exist in normal space, let alone hyperspace. The creature's voice filled the bridge, speaking directly into their minds without using the ship's communication systems. Small ones, it said, and Webb could hear something like amusement in its mental voice. You carry our gift within you now, but the gift comes with responsibility. What responsibility? Webb asked aloud. The darkness we told you about. It approaches faster than we anticipated. Your species will face it within the span of a single lifetime. You must be ready. Images flooded the bridge. Webb saw vast shadows moving between stars, consuming everything in their path. Entire solar systems simply vanishing, leaving behind empty space that hurt to look at directly. The Confederation fleets we consumed, the creature continued. Their knowledge is now part of us. We understand their technology, their tactics, their failures, All of it was inadequate against the true threat. Then how are we supposed to fight something that destroyed civilizations millions of years more advanced than ours? Webb demanded. By being what you are, the creature replied. The other species in this galaxy think in patterns. They follow rules, traditions, established methods of warfare. The darkness has faced such opponents countless times across the eons. It knows how to defeat them. And humans are different? Humans are chaos. Your species thrives on unpredictability, on doing things that should not work but do anyway. This confuses the darkness. It has no experience with such opponents. Webb felt a chill run down his spine. You want us to be your weapons. We want you to be yourselves, but enhanced, improved. The genetic changes occurring in your bodies will give you capabilities your species has never possessed. Strength, speed, intelligence, resilience, and most importantly, the ability to survive in environments that would kill unmodified humans. Dr. Vasquez spoke up. The changes aren't just physical, are they? I can feel my mind working differently, faster, making connections I never could before. Correct. Your species' greatest strength has always been its adaptability. We are simply accelerating that process. Webb looked around at his crew. Already he could see subtle changes in their faces. Their eyes were brighter, more alert. Their movements were more fluid, more precise. And there was something else, something harder to define. They looked more alive than before. What's the catch? He asked. There's always a catch. The creatures. Mental laughter was like the sound of distant thunder. The catch, as you call it, is that there is no returning to what you were. Your species will evolve or it will perish. There is no middle ground. And if we refuse this gift, then humanity will face the darkness as it is now, and it will be consumed just as countless other species have been consumed. Webb made a decision that would echo through history. Show us what we need to know. What followed was the most intense learning experience in human history. The creature downloaded information directly into their minds, bypassing the normal limitations of human cognition. They learned about weapons that could crack planets, about ships that could travel between dimensions, about the true structure of the universe itself. But more importantly, they learned about their enemy. The darkness was not a single entity, but a collective consciousness made up of billions of absorbed civilizations. It had been consuming galaxies for longer than Earth had existed, growing stronger with each conquest. It was patient, methodical, and utterly ruthless. Every species it has faced, the creature explained, has tried to fight it conventionally. They build bigger ships, more powerful weapons, stronger defenses. All of this is useless. The darkness simply absorbs their efforts and becomes stronger. Then, how do we fight it? Webb asked. By not fighting it at all. By doing something it cannot predict or understand. By being so fundamentally different from its previous opponents that its accumulated knowledge becomes a liability instead of an advantage. When the download was complete, Webb felt his mind reeling from the sheer volume of information he had absorbed. But gradually, he began to understand what the creature was suggesting. You want us to be guerrilla fighters on a galactic scale, he realized. We want you to be what you have always been. Survivors who refuse to accept defeat. The creature began to fade from their perception as their ship continued its journey through hyperspace, but its final words lingered in their minds. The changes to your bodies will accelerate when you return to normal space. Do not be afraid. Embrace what you are becoming. And remember, the fate of not just humanity, but all life in this galaxy may depend on your ability to think like humans instead of like civilized beings. When the Defiance dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, the crew was no longer entirely human. They were stronger, faster, smarter than they had been when they left, but more importantly, they thought differently. Where once they had seen obstacles, they now saw opportunities. Where once they had seen impossible odds, they now saw interesting challenges. Admiral Sarah Chen was waiting for them at Luna Station. She took one look at Captain Webb and knew immediately that something fundamental had changed. "Marcus," she said quietly, "what happened to you out there?" Webb smiled, and Sarah noticed that his teeth were slightly sharper than they had been before. "We found out why the Confederation fleets were destroyed, and we found out why humanity is exactly what the galaxy needs right now." The debriefing took 12 hours. When it was over, Sarah sat in her office staring at the report that would change everything. Outside her window, she could see Earth rotating peacefully in the void, unaware that its children had just evolved into something new. Her communicator chimed. Ambassador Zethkree's crystalline form materialized in front of her desk. "Admiral Chen," he said, "we have detected your ship's return. We trust the mission was successful." Sarah looked at the alien ambassador and realized that she was seeing him differently now. Not as a potential ally or enemy, but as something far more primitive than what humanity was becoming. "Oh yes," she said quietly. "It was very successful." Indeed, something in her tone made Zethkree's crystalline form flicker with uncertainty. "Admiral, are you quite well? You seem different." "I'm fine, Ambassador. Better than fine, actually. Tell me, how long before the Confederation expects our next report?" "Standard protocol requires monthly updates. Is there something specific you need to communicate?" Sarah smiled, and Zethkree noticed that her smile was somehow more predatory than it had been before. "Actually, yes. I need to inform the Confederation that humanity will no longer require your protection." "I beg your pardon?" "In fact," Sarah continued, "I think it's time we started protecting you." Before Zethkree could respond, Sarah cut the communication. She had work to do, and not much time to do it. The creature from Omega-7 had been clear about the timeline. The darkness was coming, and humanity had perhaps 50 years to prepare. But for the first time since she had learned about the threats lurking in deep space, Admiral Sarah Chen wasn't afraid. Humanity had found its purpose in the galaxy. They weren't going to be the protected species cowering behind alien shields. They were going to be the species that did what no one else could do. They were going to be the chaos that threw the universe's oldest predator completely off balance, and they were going to enjoy every minute of it. In the depths of space, ancient beings felt the quantum ripples of humanity's transformation and knew that the galaxy had just gained its first real hope in millions of years. The small species from the third planet had chosen to evolve rather than submit. Now all that remained was to see if chaos could triumph over order, if unpredictability could defeat inevitability, and if the human way of doing things could save not just one species, but all life in the galaxy. The war for the galaxy's survival was about to begin, and for the first time in eons, the darkness would face an enemy it had never encountered before, an enemy that didn't know how to lose. 6 months after the Defiance returned from Omega-7, Earth had become a world that the Galactic Confederation no longer recognized. The changes had started slowly, almost imperceptibly, but now they were impossible to ignore. Ambassador Zethkree materialized in Admiral Sarah Chen's office for what he suspected would be their final meeting. The human leader sat behind her desk, but everything about her was different. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain starlight. Her movements were fluid in ways that defied human physiology, and when she smiled, Zethkree could see that her teeth had become something designed for more than just eating vegetables. "Ambassador?" Sarah said, her voice carrying harmonics that hadn't been there before. "Thank you for coming. I have some news to share." Zethkree's crystalline form flickered nervously. Over the past months, he had watched humanity undergo changes that shouldn't have been possible. Their technology was advancing at impossible rates. Their military capabilities were expanding beyond all reasonable projections, and most disturbing of all, they seemed to be enjoying it. Admiral Chen, he said carefully, the Confederation Council has been monitoring the situation on Earth with growing concern. The energy signatures emanating from your world are unlike anything we have seen before. I'm sure they are, Sarah replied. We've been busy. Perhaps you could explain what exactly you have been busy with. Sarah stood up and walked to the window, overlooking Earth. The planet below was still blue and green, still beautiful, but Zethkri could see massive construction projects on every continent, structures that resembled nothing in any known architectural database. We've been preparing, Sarah said simply. Preparing for what? For the war that's coming. Zethkri felt his internal temperature drop several degrees. Admiral, the Confederation has maintained peace in this region of space for thousands of years. There is no war coming. Sarah turned to face him, and the ambassador saw something in her eyes that made him want to retreat to the safety of his ship. Ambassador, she said, gently, there are things the Confederation doesn't know about the galaxy. Things your people never discovered because you were too civilized to look for them. What things? Instead of answering directly, Sarah activated a holographic display. The image that appeared showed the galaxy from a perspective no Confederation citizen had ever seen. Dark regions spread like cancer between the spiral arms, areas where stars had simply vanished. This is what the galaxy actually looks like, Sarah explained. Your people only see the inhabited regions, the safe zones where civilized species build their societies. You never look at the empty spaces. Zethkri studied the display with growing horror. These dark regions, what are they? Feeding grounds, Sarah said. Places where something very old and very hungry has consumed entire solar systems. It's been doing this for millions of years, and it's getting closer to the inhabited regions. That's impossible. Our long-range sensors would have detected such a threat. Sarah smiled, and Zethkri noticed that her canine teeth had become distinctly pointed. Your sensors are designed to detect civilized threats. Energy signatures, artificial constructs, radio transmissions. This threat is older than civilization itself. It doesn't use technology in any way you would recognize. The holographic display zoomed in on one of the dark regions. As they watched, something moved within the darkness. Something vast and patient and absolutely alien. What is it? Zethkri whispered. We call it the darkness, Sarah replied. It's a collective consciousness made up of every species it has ever consumed, and according to our calculations, it will reach the edge of Confederation space within 50 years. Zethkri's form was flickering rapidly now, a sign of extreme agitation. If this is true, why didn't you inform the Confederation immediately? We could have begun preparations, mobilized our fleets. Because your fleets would be useless, Sarah said bluntly. The darkness has faced conventional military forces thousands of times. It knows how to defeat them. What it hasn't faced is humanity. Admiral, with all due respect, your species is primitive compared to the Confederation's most advanced civilizations. If our fleets cannot stand against this threat, what makes you think humans can? Sarah's smile became genuinely predatory now. Because we're not civilized. Before Zethkri could respond, the office door opened and Captain Marcus Webb entered. The ambassador barely recognized the human officer. Webb had grown taller, his muscle mass had increased dramatically, and his movements had the fluid grace of a predator. But it was his eyes that truly disturbed Zethkri. They held the cold intelligence of something that had looked into the abyss and decided it wasn't deep enough. Admiral, Webb said, his voice deeper than it had been before, the preparations are complete. We're ready to begin the next phase. Excellent. Ambassador Zethkri, I'd like you to witness humanity's first contribution to galactic defense. Sarah led them to the observation deck of Luna Station. Through the reinforced windows, they could see a sight that defied all known principles of engineering. Surrounding Earth's moon was a structure that seemed to be part space station, part living organism, and part something else entirely. What is that? Zethkri demanded. We call it the Forge, Sarah explained. It's where we build our new ships. As they watched, something emerged from the forge. It was sleek and predatory, covered in what looked like armor but moved like skin. Energy patterns crawled across its surface in designs that hurt to look at directly. That ship, Webb said proudly, is designed to hunt the darkness. It can exist in dimensions that conventional matter cannot reach. It can feed on energy patterns that would destroy normal vessels, and it can reproduce. Reproduce? Zethkri's form was flickering so rapidly now that he was difficult to look at. Every ship we build contains the genetic template to create more ships, Sarah explained. They hunt in packs, they learn from each encounter, and they evolve to meet new threats. This is madness, Zethkri protested. You're creating weapons that could turn on their creators. No, Webb corrected. We're creating weapons that are part of us. Each ship contains DNA from its crew. They're not just tools, they're family. A new voice spoke from behind them. And family protects family. They turned to see a figure that might once have been human, but was now something far more. Dr. Elena. Vasquez had undergone the most dramatic transformation of anyone in the crew. Her skin had a faint, luminescent quality. Her eyes held depths that seemed to contain entire galaxies. And when she moved, reality seemed to bend slightly around her. Dr. Vasquez, Zethkri said weakly, what have you become? I've become what humanity needs me to be, she replied. We all have. The genetic modifications from our contact with the entities in Omega-7, Sarah explained, have accelerated human evolution by millions of years. We're not just physically enhanced. We think differently now. We see patterns that were invisible before, and we understand our role in the galaxy, which is to be the chaos that disrupts the order of extinction, Webb said. Every other species in the galaxy follows predictable patterns. They build defensive structures, they create formal battle plans, they negotiate when possible and fight when necessary. All of this is useless against the darkness because it has encountered such responses millions of times. But humans, Dr. Vasquez continued, don't follow patterns. We adapt, we improvise, we do things that shouldn't work, but do anyway. We're the wild card the galaxy has been waiting for. Zethkri looked around at the three transformed humans and felt a chill that reached his crystalline core. You're talking about becoming monsters to fight monsters. We're talking about becoming whatever we need to become to survive, Sarah corrected, and to ensure that life continues to exist in this galaxy. The ambassador's form stabilized as he came to a decision. I must report this to the Confederation Council immediately. They need to know what humanity has become. Of course, Sarah agreed. But when you make your report, make sure you include this. She activated another holographic display. This one showed the outer edge of Confederation space, where the first dark tendrils of the approaching threat were already visible. The darkness isn't coming in 50 years, she said quietly. It's coming now. Your precious Confederation has perhaps 5 years before the first worlds are consumed? Zethkri stared at the display in horror. How do you know this? Because we're already fighting it, Webb said. Our ships have engaged the advanced scouts. We've learned their tactics, their capabilities, their weaknesses. And? Zethkri asked desperately. And we're winning, Dr. Vasquez said with satisfaction. Not easily, not without cost, but we're winning. The Confederation fleets that tried to approach Omega-7, Sarah explained, were destroyed because they fought the entities there conventionally. We succeeded because we didn't fight them at all. We communicated with them, learned from them, became partners with them. Partners? The entities in Omega-7 are the last survivors of a civilization that fought the darkness millions of years ago, Webb said. They've been waiting in hibernation for someone who could think differently enough to succeed where they failed. And they chose humanity? They chose chaos over order, Sarah replied. They chose adaptation over tradition. They chose evolution over extinction. Zeth-Kree processed this information, his crystalline matrix reconfiguring itself as he tried to understand the implications. What do you want from the Confederation? Nothing, Sarah said, and the simple word carried more weight than any threat. We no longer need your protection. In fact, we're prepared to offer our protection to you. At what cost? Sarah's smile returned, predatory and confident. No cost at all. We protect those who cannot protect themselves. It's what family does. But understand this, Webb added, his voice carrying the promise of violence. Anyone who threatens Earth or humanity or our allies will face something they're not prepared for. They'll face humans who have chosen to become more than human. Zeth-Kree looked out at the ships emerging from the forge around Luna. Each one was unique, alive, dangerous. They moved through space like predators seeking prey, and he realized that the galaxy's food chain had just been permanently altered. I will deliver your message to the Council, he said finally. Good, Sarah replied. And, Ambassador? When the darkness reaches Confederation space, remember that you have friends who specialize in impossible victories. As Zeth-Kree's form began to fade, preparing to transmit back to his ship, he heard Dr. Vasquez speak one final time. The age of civilization is ending, she said matter-of-factly. The age of survival has begun, and humans have always been very good at surviving. When the ambassador had gone, the three humans stood in comfortable silence, watching their ships patrol the space around Earth. They were no longer entirely human, but they were still fundamentally human in the ways that mattered most. They refused to accept defeat. They adapted to any challenge, and they protected those they cared about with a ferocity that had once seemed barbaric, but now seemed like the galaxy's only hope. In the depths of space, the darkness continued its ancient approach, confident in its inevitable victory. It had consumed countless civilizations, absorbed their knowledge, learned their tactics. It was prepared for any conceivable resistance, but it had never encountered humans, and it had no idea what was coming for it. The war for the galaxy's survival had begun, and for the first time in eons, the outcome was no longer certain. Humanity had evolved beyond the need for protection. Now they were the protection the galaxy needed.
Jack Miller stood alone on the observation deck of Lunar Base Alpha, staring at the vast blackness of space. His reflection in the glass showed a man with tired eyes and a stubborn jaw. 3 silver bars on his shoulder. Once, there had been 5. The demotion still stung after 6 months. Pilot Miller, a voice called from behind him. Your new assignment has arrived. Jack turned to face Captain Brooks, his current commanding officer. Brooks held out a data pad with barely hidden satisfaction. Escort duty, Brooks said. Ambassador Reed needs transport to the Galactic Summit. You leave at 0600 tomorrow. Jack took the pad without a word. Escort duty was what they gave to pilots they wanted to forget. Far from any real action, babysitting diplomats who spent their time talking instead of doing. The ambassador specifically asked for you, Brooks added, his smile fading slightly. Seems your reputation has reached certain ears. Jack's reputation had spread across the Earth Defense Force after the Battle of Mars. He had saved 3 transport ships full of civilians by flying in ways that broke every rule in the combat manual. His superiors called it reckless. The civilians called it heroic. His commanding officers settled on demoted. What ship am I getting? Jack asked, scrolling through the assignment details. The Persistence. Jack looked up sharply. That's a Class 3 shuttle, not even a proper warship. Brooks shrugged. Budget cuts, besides it's just escort duty through friendly space. The Alliance promised safe passage. The Alliance of Advanced Species had welcomed humans to the galactic community 5 years ago. Welcomed was the polite term in diplomatic circles. Tolerated was more accurate. To the older species who had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, humans were noisy children newly arrived at the adults' table. The next morning, Jack stood before the Persistence with growing doubt. The ship was small, with an outdated hull design and visible patch repairs. Ambassador Reed, a tall woman with silver hair and perfect posture, waited beside it. "Pilot Miller," she greeted him. "Your reputation precedes you." "So I keep hearing," Jack replied. "Ma'am, with respect, this ship isn't suitable for breaking rules." She raised an eyebrow. "I requested you specifically because you think differently. The Alliance considers humans primitive. I want them to remember we can be unpredictable, too." Jack studied her with new interest. "You're playing politics with my flying skills?" "I'm using every tool available," she corrected. "This summit will decide if humans get a real voice in galactic affairs or remain second-class citizens forever." 3 days into their journey through the neutral zone, Jack's unease grew. The ship's sensors were picking up strange energy readings that didn't match any known patterns. "Could be sensor ghosts," he told Reed as they studied the display. "This ship isn't exactly top of the line." "Or?" she prompted. "Or someone's using scramblers to hide their approach." Jack frowned at the screen. "But the Alliance promised safe passage, and pirates don't usually come this far into monitored space." The answer came 30 minutes later when 3 ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly in their path. Their designs were angular and predatory, painted with red markings that identified them as free traders, the polite term for pirates in this sector. "Ambassador, secure yourself in the safety pod," Jack ordered, sliding into the pilot's seat. "Standard procedure is to surrender to pirates and wait for rescue." Reed was already strapping herself in. "And what will you do, Pilot Miller?" Jack's hands flew across the controls, bringing the ship's modest defenses online. "I never was good at standard procedure." The comm system crackled. "Human vessel, power down and prepare to be boarded. Resistance is not advised." Jack opened a channel. "This is a diplomatic vessel under Alliance protection. The ambassador to the summit is aboard." "Then the ambassador will make an excellent bargaining chip," the pirate captain replied. "Power down now or be destroyed." Jack cut the communication and turned to Reed. "They're too confident. Pirates would be more nervous about attacking a diplomatic ship." The first shots fired across their bow confirmed his suspicions. The patterns were too precise, the formation too disciplined. "Those aren't pirates," Jack muttered. "They're military, disguised as pirates." He pushed the Persistence into a tight spin as energy beams carved the space where they had been. The ship groaned, under forces it wasn't designed to handle. "Can we outrun them?" Reed asked, her voice steady despite the situation. "No," Jack replied, studying the enemy formation. "But they expect us to try. They expect standard evasion patterns." Jack smiled grimly. "So let's show them something non-standard." He cut all forward thrust and fired the maneuvering jets in a pattern that sent the small ship tumbling backward while still moving forward from momentum. The pirate ships overshot their position, confused by the illogical maneuver. "What are you doing?" Reed gasped as the artificial gravity struggled to compensate. "Using physics," Jack replied. "They're flying by the book. I threw the book away years ago." He fired the ship's single-point defense laser, not at the enemy ships, but at a specific angle into empty space. The beam reflected off the polished hull of the nearest attacker, splitting into 3 weaker beams that hit vital sensor nodes on all 3 enemy vessels. While their targeting systems reset, Jack executed a maneuver that human physicists had theorized, but no pilot had ever attempted. In combat, by alternating the ship's thruster patterns in a precise sequence, he created a ripple effect in the local spacetime that momentarily confused all standard targeting algorithms. In that brief window, he fired the Persistence's modest weapons directly into the exposed engine section of the lead ship. The explosion damaged the other 2 ships, leaving them drifting. "How?" Reed stared at him. "The Alliance said that kind of spatial manipulation was impossible at sub-light speeds." Jack checked the ship's systems. They had taken damage, but nothing critical. Humans think differently, he said simply. Then he pointed to the lead ship's debris. And those aren't pirate markings under the paint. That's a Dominion military seal. Reed's face paled. The Dominion has been pushing for war with Earth for years. If they're staging fake pirate attacks, then we need to get you to that summit. Jack finished. With evidence. As they limped toward the diplomatic station, neither of them realized that combat footage from the Persistence's external cameras was already spreading across the galactic networks, showing something the older species had never seen before. A human pilot rewriting the rules of space combat. The war had already begun. The diplomatic station hung in space like a massive metal flower, its petals formed by docking bays extending from a central core. When the damaged Persistence limped into its assigned bay, emergency crews rushed to meet it, their faces showing surprise at the ship's condition. Jack helped Ambassador Reed down the ramp, both of them tired but determined. A small group of officials waited, including a tall blue-skinned alien with ridge-like features and formal military dress. Ambassador Reed, the station commander greeted her. We received your emergency transmission. Are you unharmed? Thanks. To Pilot Miller, yes, Reed replied. She gestured to the ship. We have evidence that needs to be presented to the summit immediately. The blue-skinned alien stepped forward, towering over Jack. Evidence of pirate activity? Regrettable, but hardly summit business. Admiral Coron, Reed acknowledged with a cold nod. These weren't pirates, they were Dominion military vessels disguised as pirates. Coron's face remained impassive, but his inner eyelids flickered, a sign of surprise in his species. A serious accusation. Do you have proof? Jack held up a data chip. Combat recordings and debris analysis. The Dominion seal was visible, under the fake pirate markings. Impossible, Coron dismissed. No single pilot in a diplomatic shuttle could defeat 3 combat vessels regardless of their origin. Jack met the alien's four-eyed gaze steadily. Then I guess impossible things happen sometimes. The emergency summit session buzzed with tension. Representatives from 27 species filled the chamber, their voices creating a storm of different languages that the translation system struggled to keep up with. On the main display, the combat footage from the Persistence played. Jack watched the recording with professional detachment, noting details he'd missed in the heat of battle. His spatial maneuver looked even stranger from outside. The ship seemed to flicker and distort as it moved in ways that defied conventional physics. The Dominion representative, Commander Vell, rose to speak when the recording ended. His species resembled tall, thin humans with gray skin and eyes that reflected light like a cat's. This is clearly fabricated, Vell insisted. The movements shown are physically impossible. The human is trying to provoke conflict with these false accusations. I can assure you the footage is authentic, Reed countered. And the maneuvers, while unusual, are quite possible. Just not according to your combat doctrines. Admiral Coron studied the replay with narrowed eyes. No ship can change vector that way without tearing itself apart. The physics don't allow it. From the back of the room, a voice called out, Actually, they do. Heads turned as a stocky human with wild brown hair pushed through the crowd. He wore the patch of the station's engineering corps on his jumpsuit. Tom Hayes, he introduced himself, nodding respectfully to the assembly. Station physics specialist. I've reviewed the footage, and what Pilot Miller did is theoretically sound, just never successfully implemented before. Hayes brought up a holographic display showing equations and force diagrams. Human neural processing allows for faster spatial calculations than most species. We think differently about three-dimensional movement. Jack found himself nodding. He'd never thought about the physics behind his flying. He just did what felt right in the moment. Even if this is true, Commander Vell interjected, it proves nothing about the identity of the attackers. Except for this, Ambassador Reed said, and nodded to a technician. The display changed to show a magnified image of debris floating in space, clearly showing a Dominion military seal beneath scratched-off pirate markings. The chamber erupted in chaos. After the session adjourned in disorder, Jack found himself in a quiet corner of the station's observation deck, watching distant stars. He sensed someone approach and turned to find Tom Hayes grinning at him. "The famous rule breaker," Hayes said, extending his hand. "Your flying is going to revolutionize combat theory." Jack shook the offered hand. "I was just trying to stay alive." "That's the beauty of it," Hayes replied, excitement clear in his voice. "You've discovered something profound because you weren't constrained by what everyone knows is impossible." He pulled out a small device and projected a model of the Persistence's flight path. "See here? You created a localized distortion in space-time that the targeting systems couldn't predict. The Alliance races can't do that because their neural pathways process spatial relationships differently." "You're saying humans are special?" Jack asked skeptically. "I'm saying we're different," Hayes corrected. "Not better, just we see patterns others don't and miss patterns they see." A shadow fell across them. Admiral Coran had approached silently, his expression unreadable. "Your maneuver was unexpected," the Admiral admitted reluctantly. "In 300 years of combat experience, I have never seen such an approach." Jack wasn't sure if that was a compliment. "Necessity breeds innovation." "Perhaps." Coran's inner eyelids flickered again. "But innovation can be dangerous, especially when it spreads." He handed Jack a tablet showing feeds from across galactic networks. Jack's combat footage had leaked and gone viral. Discussions, analyses, and attempts to replicate his maneuvers were happening everywhere. "Human pilots across 3 sectors are already attempting to reproduce your techniques," Coran said gravely. "The Dominion sees this as a military threat." Before Jack could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. The emergency communication system activated. "Attention all personnel," the station commander's voice announced. "We have received reports of Dominion fleet movements near human colonies. They are calling it a preventative security operation. All representatives please return to the summit chamber immediately." Tom Hayes' face paled. "They're afraid of what you've shown is possible." "Because of one pilot?" Jack asked in disbelief. "Admiral," Coran's expression was grim. "Because of what one pilot represents. A new way of fighting that their defenses aren't prepared for." He turned to leave, then paused. "In my experience, fear is the most common reason for starting wars." As they hurried back to the summit chamber, Jack saw his combat footage playing on screens throughout the station. What had been a desperate fight for survival was now something else. A symbol, a challenge to the established order of space. Combat. On one screen, a Dominion official was speaking. "These human combat techniques represent an unacceptable security risk to established galactic peace. We must act decisively to contain this threat before it spreads." Jack felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He had only been trying to survive, to complete his mission. Now, without intending to, he had provided the spark that might ignite a galactic war. And somewhere in the back of his mind, a voice whispered that perhaps this confrontation had been inevitable from the moment humans reached for the stars. The summit chamber had transformed from a place of diplomatic discussion to a war room in less than 6 hours. Emergency lights cast harsh shadows across worried faces as representatives argued loudly. At the center of the chamber, a holographic display showed Dominion warships moving toward human settlements near the border regions. Jack stood beside Ambassador Reed, watching the chaos unfold. The Dominion's representative, Commander Vell, had conveniently disappeared before the emergency session began. "They're calling it a security operation," Reed said, her voice tight with anger. 23 ships against farming colonies with no military presence. Admiral Coran approached them, his blue skin looking almost gray under the emergency lighting. "The Dominion Council claims they are neutralizing a strategic threat." He looked directly at Jack. "You? That's absurd," Tom Hayes protested, joining the group. "They're attacking civilians because of one pilot's defensive maneuver?" "Not the maneuver itself," Coran corrected. "What it represents. The footage of your battle has been viewed by millions across the galaxy. Human pilots everywhere are experimenting with new techniques based on your approach." Jack felt a cold weight in his stomach. "I didn't ask for any of this." "Few who change history ever do," Coran replied. The main display shifted to show a transmission from Earth Defense Headquarters. The stern face of Admiral Chen filled the screen. The Dominion has declared all human vessels to be potential military threats, Chen reported. They've given us an ultimatum. Ground our entire fleet or face open conflict, Reed stepped forward. Admiral, we have evidence that the Dominion staged the attack on our diplomatic shuttle. They're creating a pretext for war. We've seen the evidence, Chen confirmed. But grounding our fleet would leave Earth defenseless. The Security Council has rejected their demands. The transmission ended, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. So it begins, Coron said quietly. 3 days later, Jack found himself in a hastily repurposed laboratory on the diplomatic station. Tom Hayes had converted the space into a tactical simulation center with screens showing combat data from the increasing skirmishes between human and Dominion forces. The problem, Hayes explained to Jack and Admiral Coron, is that your maneuver only works once. The Dominion is already adapting their targeting systems. Jack nodded grimly. Reports from the front lines confirmed it. The trick that had saved the Persistence wouldn't work again. The Dominion ships were now programmed to predict the spatial distortion effect. But that's just one technique, Jack said. If humans really do process spatial relationships differently, there must be other approaches. Coron, who had surprisingly offered his expertise to the humans, manipulated the holographic display. Traditional combat doctrine is based on power and position. Bigger ships, better position, more firepower. That's been the way of space warfare for 1,000 years. But we don't have bigger ships, Jack pointed out. No, Hayes agreed with a growing smile. But what if we use our different way of seeing space to change how small ships work together? For the next 12 hours, the unlikely trio worked on something new, a combat formation that Hayes dubbed the Swarm Dance. It utilized multiple, smaller vessels moving in patterns that created confusion in standard targeting systems. It's like a flock of birds, Jack explained as they ran simulations. Each individual follows simple rules, but the group creates complex patterns that are hard to predict. Impossible to predict, Coron corrected, studying the results with growing respect. Because the pattern emerges from the group, not from a central command. As they refined the technique, news arrived that the Alliance Council had fractured. Several species had aligned with the Dominion against the human threat, while others remained neutral. Only a few had spoken in humanity's defense. We're running out of time, Hayes said, looking at a display showing Dominion forces advancing on the Proxima colony. Then we need to test this now, Jack replied. He turned to Coron. I need a ship. The command center of Earth Defense Force Outpost Delta 7 buzzed with nervous energy as Jack explained the swarm dance technique to 12 human pilots. These weren't the elite forces. They were patrol pilots, border guards, and courier runners, the only ones close enough to intercept the Dominion fleet heading for Proxima Colony. This breaks every rule in the manual, one pilot objected. That's the point, Jack replied. They expect us to follow rules. Their rules. Rules designed for their way of thinking. He showed them the simulation again. Trust your instincts. Humans have always been good at seeing patterns others miss. As the pilots prepared to launch in their mismatched collection of vessels, Admiral Coron approached Jack. I've analyzed your chances, the alien said quietly. The Dominion fleet outguns you 10-1. Jack nodded. I know. Yet you still go. Those colonists have no other defense, Jack said simply. Something changed in Coron's four-eyed gaze. A new respect, perhaps even understanding. Then I will join you. Jack blinked in surprise. You're an Alliance admiral. If you fight against the Dominion, I am sworn to protect peace, Coron replied. Sometimes that requires taking sides. The battle at Proxima's orbital approach became the stuff of legends. 13 small ships against a Dominion battle group should have been a massacre. Instead, it became the first demonstration of the swarm dance. The human vessels moved in seemingly random patterns that actually followed complex mathematical relationships. They appeared to be everywhere and nowhere, their movements impossible to predict by traditional targeting algorithms. Coron's ship provided covering fire, as Jack led the swarm through the heart of the Dominion formation. The enemy vessels, accustomed to fighting in orderly patterns, found themselves firing at empty space as the humans danced between their shots. For 30 minutes, the impossible battle continued. The human ships darted and wove, landing precise hits on Dominion weapons and sensors while avoiding their main guns. They didn't try to destroy the larger vessels, just disable them. When it ended, 7 of the 13 small ships had been damaged, but all remained operational. The Dominion fleet, though largely intact, was in disarray. Their formation had collapsed, and 3 of their main vessels had lost weapons capability. As the Dominion ships retreated, communications channels across the galaxy lit up with the news. A handful of small ships had forced a major Dominion battle group to withdraw. More importantly, the battle footage showed something that shocked military strategists throughout the galaxy. Humans weren't fighting to destroy. They had deliberately targeted weapons and sensors while avoiding life support and crew quarters. You could have destroyed their command ship, Coron noted as they watched the Dominion retreat. Why didn't you? Jack looked at the alien who had become an unexpected ally. Because this isn't about destroying enemies. It's about showing there's another way to fight, and another way to end fights. As they returned to the outpost, news arrived that human colonies across 3 sectors were reporting Dominion ships withdrawing from orbit. The immediate threat had passed, but something more significant had changed. The galaxy now knew that humans didn't just fight differently. They thought differently about what winning meant, and that made them more dangerous, or more valuable, than anyone had imagined. The war had escalated, but so had the stakes. And Jack Miller, once a demoted pilot on escort duty, had become the face of a revolution in space combat that could change the balance of power forever. The name Rule Breaker followed Jack Miller everywhere now. It was whispered in the corridors of the diplomatic station, flashed across information networks throughout human space, and spoken with either fear or admiration in alien councils. 2 weeks after the battle at Proxima, humanity found itself in an unexpected position, respected and feared in equal measure. Jack hated it. I didn't ask to be a symbol, he told Tom Hayes as they worked in their makeshift tactical lab. The space had grown since their first days, with additional screens and simulation equipment provided by Earth Defense Command. Symbols rarely volunteer for the job, Hayes replied, manipulating a holographic display showing the latest Dominion fleet movements. But the swarm dance technique has given our colonies a fighting chance. Jack nodded reluctantly. Reports from across human space confirmed that smaller defense forces using the new tactics could hold their own against numerically superior Dominion fleets. For the first time since the conflict began, humanity wasn't just running and hiding. Admiral Coron entered the lab, his blue face showing signs of fatigue. As the only Alliance admiral to openly side with humans, he'd been officially censured by his government but allowed to remain as an observer, a thin excuse that let him continue helping without his species officially taking sides. They're adapting, Coron announced without preamble, transferring data to the main display. The Dominion has developed specialized countermeasures for the swarm dance. The screen showed footage from a recent battle near Europa Station. Human ships moved in the now familiar swarm pattern, but Dominion vessels released clouds of micro-drones that created a targeting mesh, predicting movement corridors, and forcing the human ships into predictable evasion patterns. 3 human defense ships lost, Coron reported grimly. The Dominion is learning. Jack studied the footage closely. Then we need to learn faster. For days, the 3 worked on developing new tactics. The swarm dance had bought valuable time, but its effectiveness was declining as Dominion forces adapted. They needed something more fundamental, something that couldn't be easily countered. The problem is physics itself, Hayes said late one night, rubbing his tired eyes. We're still bound by the same laws of movement as everyone else, even if we visualize them differently. Jack stared at the equations floating in the holographic display. What if we weren't? Hayes looked up. What do you mean? Quantum mechanics, Jack said slowly, an idea forming. At the quantum level, particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously until observed. Theoretical physics isn't going to help us in combat, Hayes objected. But Corin had grown very still. Perhaps it could, the alien said quietly. There are rumors of experimental Dominion technology based on quantum uncertainty principles. Jack leaned forward. What kind of technology? Nothing proven, Corin cautioned. But there are reports of ships appearing to be in two places at once, confusing sensor systems. Hayes's eyes widened. Quantum superposition applied to macroscopic objects? That should be impossible. Many things should be impossible, Jack replied with a hint of a smile, until someone does them anyway. For the next 3 days they worked on a concept Hayes dubbed the quantum shadow, a technique that used specialized field generators to create a temporary quantum uncertainty field around a ship. The field wouldn't make the ship truly exist in multiple locations, but it would create enough sensor confusion to make targeting systems uncertain about the ship's exact position. It's not true quantum superposition, Hayes explained to the pilot selected to test the technique. But it creates a similar effect for a few crucial seconds, long enough to evade targeting or land a precise hit. And it requires human spatial intuition, Jack added. The pilot has to navigate based on feeling rather than instruments while the field is active. Most non-human species can't process the spatial disorientation. The pilots looked skeptical, but the growing casualty reports from across human space silenced most objections. They needed something new, something the Dominion couldn't easily counter. As testing of the quantum shadow technique progressed, Admiral Corin received a secure transmission from his homeworld. Jack found the Admiral in his quarters afterward, studying ancient-looking symbols on a datapad. Bad news? Jack asked. Corin seemed lost in thought. Perhaps illuminating news. He gestured for Jack to sit. My government has granted me access to historical archives not shared with humans before. They're still helping us? I thought your species was officially neutral. Some truths transcend current politics, Corin replied. These records suggest humans aren't the first species to demonstrate your unconventional approach to space physics. Jack leaned forward. There were others? Corin nodded. A species called the predecessors, who vanished from galactic records about 15,000 years ago. There are fragmentary accounts of them using combat techniques that defied conventional understanding of space-time relationships. What happened to them? Corin's inner eyelids flickered, a sign of discomfort. The records are unclear. There was conflict with ancient power structures, then nothing. They simply disappear from history. A chill ran down Jack's spine. You think the same could happen to humans? I think, Corin said carefully, that those who challenge established ways of understanding the universe often face resistance, sometimes violent resistance. Before Jack could respond, an alarm blared throughout the station. The tactical display in Corin's quarters activated automatically, showing a massive Dominion fleet dropping out of faster-than-light travel near Proxima Colony. They're back, Jack said, already moving toward the door, and in much greater numbers. The battle for Proxima Colony would later be called the turning point of the conflict. 23 human ships equipped with prototype quantum shadow generators faced a Dominion battle group of over 70 vessels. On paper, it was a hopeless mismatch, but for the first crucial minutes, the new technique worked perfectly. Human ships flickered in and out of sensor certainty, appearing to be in multiple locations at once. Dominion targeting systems failed to get clear locks, while the human pilots, navigating by instinct during the quantum uncertainty, landed precise hits on key systems. Jack led the defense from the newly commissioned ship Defiance, coordinating the human response while demonstrating the effectiveness of the quantum shadow firsthand. For 20 minutes, victory seemed possible. Then the Dominion adapted again. They switched to wide dispersal weapons that didn't require precise targeting, filling space with so much destructive energy that exact location became irrelevant. The quantum uncertainty field provided no protection against this brute force approach. Fall back to secondary positions, Jack ordered as the first human ships began to report critical damage. Proximity formation, focus fire on their command, vessels. But it was too late for a coordinated response. The human squadron was scattered, their formation broken by the Dominion's overwhelming firepower. Jack watched in horror as ship after ship reported critical failures or went silent entirely. The Defiance shuddered as a direct hit overloaded its shields. Warning lights flashed across the bridge as systems failed. Quantum generator offline, the tactical officer reported. We're visible to all targeting systems. Jack made a split-second decision. All power to engines. Get us between the Dominion fleet and the colony. As the damaged ship limped into position as a makeshift shield for the civilian colony below, Jack opened a channel to all remaining human vessels. Defensive positions only, he ordered. Protect the evacuation transports at all costs. The battle had been lost, but as the remaining human ships formed a last defensive line around the civilian evacuation, something unexpected happened. The Dominion fleet, poised for the killing blow, hesitated. Their holding position, the sensor officer reported in disbelief. On the main communication channel, a transmission from the Dominion command ship appeared. The stern face of a high-ranking Dominion officer filled the screen. Your tactics are unconventional, human, the officer said. But even more unexpected is your willingness to sacrifice yourselves for non-combatants. Jack met the alien's gaze steadily. That's what soldiers do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. A long moment of silence followed. The evacuation ships will be granted safe passage, the Dominion officer finally said. But this colony is now under Dominion control. Any human military vessel remaining in the system after the evacuation will be destroyed. As the transmission ended, Jack slumped in his command chair. They had lost the battle in the colony, but the civilians would survive, and perhaps more. Importantly, something had changed in how the Dominion saw humanity. It wasn't just human combat tactics that were unexpected, it was human values. As the Defiance limped away from Proxima with the last evacuation ships, Jack knew that innovation alone wouldn't win this war. The Dominion would always adapt to new tactics eventually. They needed something more fundamental, something that would change the nature of the conflict itself. They needed to understand why the Dominion truly feared humanity's different way of thinking. The emergency council chamber aboard the Earth Alliance flagship Determination hummed with tense voices. 3 months had passed since the battle at Proxima Colony. The war had settled into a grinding stalemate. Humans continued to develop innovative tactics, and the Dominion continued to adapt. Neither side could gain a decisive advantage, but the human colonies were paying the heaviest price. Jack stood at the viewport, staring at the distant stars while Admiral Coron and Tom Hayes argued with Earth's military leadership. Dark circles marked Jack's eyes. He hadn't slept properly since Proxima. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the ships lost under his command. The quantum shadow technique isn't enough, General Ward was saying. We need something more decisive. More destructive, you mean? Hayes countered. We've been down that path. The Dominion simply escalates in response. Jack turned from the viewport. Why do they fear us so much? That's the question we should be asking. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. They attacked us first, General Ward reminded him. They disguised their ships as pirates and tried to destroy a diplomatic vessel. But why? Jack pressed. What made them so afraid of humans that they risked galactic war to contain us? Admiral Coron stepped forward, holding the ancient datapad he had been studying for weeks. I believe I may have found an answer. He placed the pad on the central display table, and holographic symbols filled the air above it. Text in a language no human had seen before. These are records from the predecessor civilization I mentioned, Coron explained. My government granted full access to the archives after Proxima. What we found is troubling. The symbols shifted, forming patterns that the translation system struggled to convert. The predecessors were feared because they were what the ancient texts call pattern breakers, Coron continued. Beings who could perceive relationships in space-time that other species could not. The ancient powers feared this ability because it represented unpredictability. Like humanity's spatial intuition, Hayes said quietly. Coron nodded. There's more. The texts speak of a prophecy that pattern breakers would one day return and either bring chaos to the galaxy or usher in a new age of understanding. The Dominion leadership believes humans are these returning pattern breakers. Jack stared at the ancient symbols. They're fighting us because of a prophecy? Fear rarely needs logical justification, Coron replied. Especially fear of the unknown. General, Ward frowned. This is all very interesting, but how does it help us end this war? Jack's mind was racing through possibilities. It means we've been fighting the wrong battle. We've been trying to win through better combat techniques, but that just confirms their fears about us. He looked around the room. What if instead of showing how humans fight differently, we show how humans can create differently? For the next week, Jack, Hayes, and Coron worked with a team of Earth's best engineers on something completely new. Not a weapon or combat technique, but a revolutionary propulsion system that combined human spatial intuition with the quantum principles they had discovered while developing the quantum shadow. If this works, Hayes explained to the council, it will allow faster-than-light travel without the massive energy requirements of current systems. Smaller ships, less fuel, safer transitions between normal space and FTL. And how does a new engine end a war? General Ward asked skeptically. Because we're going to give it away, Jack said simply. The silence that followed was profound. Give away our most advanced technology? To the enemy? Ward finally spluttered. Jack nodded. To everyone, the Dominion, the Alliance, Independent, Worlds. Everyone gets the same technology, the same advantages. That's unprecedented, one of the council members said. Exactly, Jack replied. That's the point. We show them that pattern breakers don't have to bring chaos. We can bring progress if they'll let us. The test of the new propulsion system was scheduled to take place in neutral space, with observers from all major galactic powers invited to witness it. As preparations continued, long-range sensors detected a massive Dominion fleet approaching. The test site. They're not here to observe, General Ward warned. They're here to destroy the prototype before we can demonstrate it. Jack studied the tactical display. The human defensive fleet was outnumbered 3-1. Then we need to show them something else first. He turned to Coron. I need your help, and I need the Defiance ready to launch in 1 hour. The Defiance, repaired and upgraded since Proxima, moved ahead of the human defensive line as the Dominion fleet approached. Behind it, the prototype ship with the new drive system remained on standby, its revolutionary engine humming with potential. Dominion command vessel is hailing us, the communications officer reported. On screen, Jack ordered. The face of Commander Vell, the Dominion representative who had disappeared from the diplomatic station months ago, appeared on the main display. This demonstration will not proceed, Vell stated flatly. The pattern breaker. Technology must be contained. Jack met his gaze calmly. You've been fighting us because you think we'll bring chaos to the established order. What if you're wrong? The prophecy? Prophecies can be interpreted many ways, Jack interrupted. The text speaks of pattern breakers bringing either chaos or understanding. Which outcome happens depends not just on us, but on how you choose to respond to us. Vell's expression remained cold. Words will not deter us. The prototype will be destroyed. Jack nodded as if expecting this answer. Then perhaps a demonstration of a different kind will. He cut the transmission and turned to his tactical officer. Activate the quantum shadow. The Defiance's experimental system powered up, creating the now familiar quantum uncertainty field around the ship. But instead of using it to evade or attack, Jack ordered the ship directly toward the heart of the Dominion fleet. Sir? The helm officer questioned. Trust me, Jack said. And signal Admiral Coron. Execute Phase 2. As the Defiance approached the Dominion formation, something unexpected happened. The quantum field expanded, encompassing not just the human ship, but the nearest Dominion vessels as well. On all ships, sensors fluctuated wildly as the boundaries between them seemed to blur. What is happening? Vell demanded over an open channel, his voice betraying fear for the first time. "We call it a quantum bridge," Jack replied. "A shared state of quantum uncertainty between vessels. Right now, your ships and mine exist in a connected state. We can either emerge from it as enemies or as something else." In the strange quantum space between certainties, Jack could almost feel the presence of the Dominion crews, their confusion, their fear, but also their curiosity. In that moment of connection, understanding flowed both ways. "You can destroy us," Jack continued, "or you can join us in creating something new. The choice has always been yours." For a long moment, there was silence across all communication channels. Then, slowly, the Dominion weapons powered down. "We will observe your demonstration," Vel finally said. The prototype ship with the new drive system performed flawlessly, transitioning to faster-than-light travel with less than a tenth of the energy required by conventional systems. More importantly, the detailed specifications and theoretical principles were transmitted to all observers simultaneously. No secrets, no hidden advantages. As the demonstration concluded, representatives from both the Dominion and Alliance requested emergency sessions to discuss the implications. For the first time since the conflict began, genuine diplomatic talks replaced military posturing. 1 week later, Jack found himself back on the observation deck of the diplomatic station, where everything had started. Admiral Coron joined him, watching as ships from dozens of species moved through nearby space, no longer in combat formations but in orderly traffic patterns. The quantum bridge was a significant risk, Coron observed. You had no way of knowing how they would react to such intimacy with a human ship. Jack smiled faintly. "Sometimes you have to break the rules of engagement entirely." "The provisional peace accord is holding," Coron noted. "The Dominion has withdrawn from human colonies, and your government has shared the propulsion technology as promised. And the prophecy about pattern breakers?" Coron's inner eyelids flickered, an expression Jack now recognized as amusement. "Reinterpreted, as prophecies often are. Now they say pattern breakers were meant to challenge existing patterns so new ones could emerge, not to bring chaos but to prevent stagnation." Jack gazed out at the stars. "And the truth?" "Truth is rarely simple," Coron replied. "Humans do think differently than most species. That makes you unpredictable, which can be frightening. But it also makes you innovative, which can be valuable." The galaxy needed both perspectives, the stability of established patterns and the creativity to break them when necessary. A small ship approached the station, the first vessel built by a joint human-Dominion engineering team, using the new propulsion system combined with Dominion defensive technology. "What will you do now?" Coron asked. "The pilot who rewrote the rules of space combat has become something of a legend," Jack smiled. "I think I'd like to teach. Not just humans, but anyone who wants to learn a different way of seeing space." Coron nodded approval. The new Interspecies Flight Academy would welcome such an instructor. As they watched the joint-designed ship dock smoothly with the station, Jack thought about how a desperate maneuver to save one small diplomatic vessel had cascaded into a war and then into an unexpected peace. The rules of space combat had indeed been rewritten, but so had the rules of space cooperation. And perhaps that had been the point all along. Not to win through destruction, but to show that seeing the universe differently didn't have to be a threat. It could be the greatest gift one species could offer another. Behind them, the first class of the new academy, pilots from 20 different species, including both humans and Dominion, waited to learn how to see space through each other's eyes. The war was over. The learning had just begun.